Hello, I'm Dane, and this is Dan Explains. Any longtime viewer of my channel knows I occasionally like to cover SpaceX's Starship. Today is one of those videos. A little over a year ago, I made a video about how long Starship has to go before it will be ready. One of the big issues I pointed out was the fragility of the heat shield on Starship. My thought was that they may have to make a big change to fix it. Well, guess what? After Flight 6, Elon recently hinted that they may be doing just that. Let me explain why. One of the big hurdles Starship has to overcome to be useful is to have a completely reusable heat shield. To his credit, Elon has acknowledged it's one of the biggest hurdles left, although the heat shield has allowed Starship to survive re-entry on 3 flights now. However, in all 3 flights, it was damaged. Starship's 6th flight prompted Elon to comment that an active heat shield is back on the table. I predicted over a year ago that after they had the data from the new re-entries, they might do that. Now, I don't think that they will get rid of the entire ceramic heat shield, but before I get into that, let me go over what an active heat shield is. An active heat shield is one that either uses active cooling or transpirational cooling, or both. Active cooling is actually used quite extensively in rocket engine nozzles. Rocket engine nozzles have to deal with a lot of the same stresses as a heat shield, specifically a lot of heat. There are 3 main ways to do that. All 3 are useful in heat shields as well. The first way is to use an ablative nozzle, which simply chips away as it gets hot to help keep it cool. This is the same way the heat shield on NASA's Orion spacecraft works. It's also the reason why NASA has delayed the first manned mission to the moon under Artemis, because Orion's heat shield ablated much more than they were expecting. Obviously, ablative rocket nozzles and heat shields are one-time use items, so they're very useful for vehicles that are just one-time use. Although SpaceX does use ablative cooling in the nozzle of the Falcon rocket's 2nd stage, and the heat shield of the Dragon capsule. If you want something to be rapidly reusable, you don't want to rely on a part that needs to be completely replaced every time it flies. So, what are the 2 other options that rocket nozzles use? The first is simple active cooling, where the rocket nozzle is made out of hundreds of tiny pipes through which oxidizer propellant flow, which are often extremely cold, because they are liquid oxygen or the even colder liquid hydrogen. These fluids expand as they absorb the heat, at which point they are released into the nozzle to combust. The expansion from being heated in the rocket nozzle is sometimes all that is needed to provide enough pressure for the rocket engine to work, although many still use pumps in addition to that, like the Raptor engine on SpaceX's Starship and Super Heavy. Another technique that's often combined with one of the previous 2 is to use a vapor barrier. The Saturn V first stage and SpaceX's Falcon stage both do. This is what causes the dark sooty smoke over the flames of the Saturn V. This works by dumping the exhaust from the preburner, which runs the pump for the engine, into the nozzle. Obviously, this technique would have to be modified to work with the heat shield. There is a rocket out there that uses both of the active techniques without a passive ceramic heat shield, and that's the 2nd stage of Stoke Space's Nova rocket. Although it has yet to fly to orbit, the plan is to have the propellant and the oxidizer pushed through the heat shield through tubes. Some of it will be released through a hole in the middle of the shield to provide extra protection by creating a vapor barrier. The pressure generated by heating the propellant and oxidizer will then be used to start the engines for the 2nd stage's landing burn. As you can tell, Stoke Space went with a completely different design with their Nova rocket than SpaceX went with Starship. And the Nova rocket will be a much smaller medium-lift vehicle similar to SpaceX's Falcon 9. Stoke Space's Nova was designed from the ground up to have an active heat shield. Starship wasn't. For Starship to have a completely active heat shield, it would need a lot more plumbing, so I think they will use it sparingly, most likely just in the areas where the heat shield keeps getting damaged, like near the weld seams. As you can see in this video from Flight 6, that row of tiles fell off, no doubt after re-entry, probably due to thermal expansion and contraction. Active cooling could help especially in those areas, because it isn't fragile, One of the considerations SpaceX will have with going this route is the propellant source. The propellant from the header tanks or the propellant from the main tanks. Personally, I think they'll choose the header tanks, because there still may be chunks of ice floating around inside the main tanks, which is what caused SN-25 to tumble in space on flight test 2. Its thrusters got clogged with ice, causing the ship to lose control and burn up on re-entry. If the active cooling gets clogged, the ship would most likely suffer a similar fate. In SpaceX fashion, they'll probably work incrementally to see how little active heat shield they can get away with. So the active heat shield will probably take a long time to develop. That probably means it'll be a while before we know exactly what form it will take. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, and other topics ranging from theology to science, please press the like button, subscribe to my channel, and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon to get extra content and special perks. Link in the description. The more people support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.